believe in African knowledge of ourselves and our situation. We believe in African agency about our ability to change in our situation. We believe in African solidarity, our ability to learn and support one another and act collectively when necessary.
Start with Muthoni Wanyeki to just give us a perspective about overall what are her perspectives about Africa as a continent.
And I think all of us love and hate Africa at the same time, right? We love it because there's so much energy, there's so much movement, there's so many opportunities. We hate it because we constrain ourselves, right? Our leadership constrains us, we constrain ourselves in our own imagination. There's so many things that are happening that are literally man-made, like catastrophes, opportunity costs, and so on. So it's a love-hate relationship, but there's nothing better than traveling across the continent, learning new things, meeting new people, realizing how many commonalities there are amongst us, seeing the difference that, ordinary people can make doing extraordinary things. I mean, that's the way I feel about it. It's a love-hate relationship.
But there's also a lot of hope here in this region, and that's what I prefer to celebrate. I prefer to celebrate the hope and the possibilities that our friends and fellow Africans in Sudan have demonstrated. The people of Sudan have demonstrated that it's possible to reclaim your country. It's possible to reclaim your societies, and that I think is what increasingly we need to work with communities and societies towards, which is to amplify the spaces, the possibilities of reclaiming our states and societies. It's tough work. It comes with a lot of pain, comes with lots of damage, as it were. But that's what I would rather celebrate. And in Eastern Africa, and with the many partners that we are working with, we are spending more and more time trying to identify where those opportunities are, where the cracks are, and where if people focus their energies, you may then have you may be able to see openings in the coming days and years. But I think these struggles for better societies are long-term struggles. Really. We have to invest in the long term. So when you see the changes that we've seen in countries like Ethiopia and in countries like Sudan, we have to remember that these are the outcomes of many years of struggle. And sometimes I think we have a short-term view or a desire to see very quick results. Of course, it would be great if we can get those results quickly, but I think if you look at how change has happened in our region, it's often the product of years and years of struggles by individuals, by movements, and we have to take, I think, also that long-term view about how change and struggles in the end are able to bear results.
I also think this continent teaches us all that change is not linear, right? It's more like circular, it's more, so we had independence, all that hope, all that disappointment. We had the second liberation in the 90s, all that, optimism, all that hope very quickly recaptured. We had the so-called Arab Spring, which was not only an Arab Spring because not all North Africans are Arabs. All that hope quickly recaptured. And I feel we're on the cusp of something else. I feel we're on the cusp of some new cycle of optimism. The thing is, how do you harness the energy? How do you harness all the intellectual knowledge we have, the analysis of our seniors, of our elders, of our thinkers on okay, this time round, how do we keep that space of opportunity open just a bit longer, make a few more gains, right? Learning and using what we learned about what constrained us in the 90s and the Arab Spring era.
So if you look at South Africa, for example, we've gone through a period of euphoric excitement about our own independence. Then we went through, and we were all the Rainbow Nation. Everybody was the Rainbow Nation. Many, many promises were made. Everybody felt that we were finally, after years and years of apartheid, we could now do what we need to do for ourselves as South Africans. And then we went through a phase where the Rainbow Nation slowly became black and white, which is in fact why now reality is biting, and we now have another sense that the work hasn't been done as much as we thought it was being done. We need to go back to reclaiming our civil society, to reinvigorate the civil society, so that we can do a number of things that needs to be done with government as civil society. Because there was a time where civil society just went through a dip, even though it existed in South Africa and it still does exist. But in that civil society space, we need new and young thinkers, leaders that are able to come in with energy and a sense of inspiration and commitment. Because a lot of people who have been in that space, especially those that were there prior to 1994 and are still there now, are exhausted because they've gone through dips and changes. And so what we need is to be able to have that young spirit rising up and being able to really get into a place where either as a social movement or as a very strong organized civil society, we're able to achieve the future that we want to live for our generations, the next generation.
So I'll come back to that future. You try and portray for us what that future looks like. But I go to Sipo to just make a contribution.
Yes, I want to pick up, I think, from the points made, including by Bulelwa. So as difficult as things might be, one of the most fascinating things about our continent is that there's always somewhere to look and find inspiration, right? So the struggles that can go on for years and years. I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm a child of the struggle. And we had Mugabe for 40 years. And he became this pariah, this freedom fighter who really became this oppressor who then turned and destroyed the country, took away everything that we had hoped would get out of our independence, which was something that cost lives and people who died. Now, for years and years, nobody ever thought anything could change. And even as he left and his compatriots removed him, many of us thought this is nothing, there's no change here. But our trajectory was the same as the Sudanese. For many, many years, we never even thought. Mugabe and Bashir were friends, they were close. Bashir had come in through a coup, they had perfected the art and the science of repressing their people, using guns and military and force and fear and jails and murder and killings. And then one day, the Sudanese decided no more. We're not taking it anymore. We don't care, they can kill us. And they did get killed. And they said, you can kill us. And they just stayed there until they defeated this powerful army that had for years and years cowed them. They wouldn't even stand up because they knew if we let alone raise our head, they will shoot us, they will kill. But one day they decided no more. And this for me, you can look in so many different places. This for me is what inspires. This for me says, African people, wherever they are, despite their oppression and subjugation, they're just a silent volcano, just waiting to just erupt. And when they do, you better get out of the way. And we need to keep reminding our leaders that you mistreat people at your own peril, because the day they decide, you will not even see them coming.
So I'll come back to you. I remember we packed the whole issue of the future, and I liked that when you talked about you're hopeful about the future. And in my mind, I'm thinking you may be having some sort of future that you are thinking about. What kind of future are you seeing, when you look at Africa? What future do you envision for Africa?
Well, obviously, it's a romantic future right now, which in my lifetime probably is unachievable, but we can all do the bit we need to do to be able to create a successful, unified, rich and really quite robust African continent that understands its role in the world and that is able to negotiate with other continents on the basis of unity. Okay? When it comes to my own country, I am really inspired by the endurance of the human spirit and the fact that people have human agency and that the young people do not have the baggage of the past and that they are able to actually organize in ways. So things like Fees Must Fall, because I thought for a long time that our young generation was lost. And I remember when the first day of Fees Must Fall, I was sitting in a coffee shop and I was sobbing because I was watching them. It makes me feel like crying even now because I was like, gosh, here they are. I was like, here they are. I thought they were a young, lost generation, completely unconnected with the past, do not understand the power of the vote. They were just lost. But when they had enough, there they were. Yeah, last year, when the women had enough around violence against women, there they were at the union buildings. It feels so, all of those bursts of energy are symbols that we're not dormant. You know, we can see things happening, state capture, all sorts of things happening, but there is a sense that it gets to a stage where it just erupts into positive energy. And that's the time when you need to harness that energy. So young people in South Africa are really vibrant, they are really focused. Yes, of course, a lot of them are in dire situations, you know, high unemployment, really illiteracy, and all of those things, but it doesn't stop them from being able to say, you need to hear us.
Like everyone has said, what encourages me is sort of realizing, you know, you all have the shock when you're an activist, right? For many years, you're the foot soldier, you're running around doing all the grunt work, and you love it, right? Because it's fun. Then comes a time where you're like, oh my God, something happens, and you're like, wait a minute, where are the leaders? I'm the leader. And it's a shocking moment, right? But then you try and do your best, you try and rise to the occasion, flaws and warts and all. But then the next moment is precisely what you're saying, where you're like, yo, man, I'm an old chick. There are 2 generations of people behind me. And what is this duty of intergenerational transfer? All the energy is there. All the sort of, you know, things that you wouldn't do now because you're like, really, I am not going to a protest where I'm going to be like, whatever, like, but they'll do that. But how do you sort of share the lessons of organizing from the past? Sort of listen to them about new spaces of organizing, new ways of organizing. And I think that's what we don't do enough within country, but we also don't do it enough across the continent, like learning from each other, listening to each other. And that appetite is there. You know, here in Kenya, we're in Kenya right now, Kenyans went on the street in support of the Sudan. And you know, the Sudanese were amazed. They're like, solidarity from, you know, and we don't do that enough. But there's hunger.
For Bobby Wine.
They went on the streets for our Ugandans, and we have to enable that a lot more, because there's that hunger for learning and hunger for sharing of experiences and hunger for like tactics and meaning and yeah.
Anybody else wants to jump in?
I agree with Muthoni that while the experience has been generally disappointing from a leadership perspective, we've been able to produce quite inspirational leaders who have demonstrated a real commitment to changing the trajectory of their own countries. So the Prime Minister of Ethiopia is one such example. His predecessor had a different vision of developing the country, and he did, but the methodology was different. So what this demonstrates is that beyond, and of course, even the shift in Ethiopia was also a result of years and years of struggle. We sometimes forget. And then there was a coincidence between the struggle and then a leader who got it, who realized
Party that got it.
a party that got it, which realized, hang on, we can't keep doing the same thing over and over again because we're going to keep having the same result. But we forget that Ethiopians had always been agitating for a more democratic society, for a just society, for a fairer society, for an inclusive society, in its ethnically fragmented manner. So for me, that's inspiring. And when I look into the future, I think that the continent will continue to produce such leaders, and I hope that people will be ready and willing to embrace them and support them when they do come. When they do emerge. So I'm quite hopeful, and I look even in my own region, in Southern Africa, where we have the last of these liberation movements, that some of them are acutely aware of the necessity to renew themselves. And they are. It's hard, it's very difficult, but some are realizing we can't do the same. They're forcing the old leaders to retire. They're bringing newer leaders, not too young, but they are recognizing that there is no way they can sustain this old. We're not in the war anymore. The war is a different one. It's about poverty, inequality, access to education, and all these other things.
In Eastern Africa, I would wish a future in which the transitions in Ethiopia and Sudan become successful, because when they do, they create pressure on everybody else to sort of behave and also
change.
begin to do change in the right direction. So that's why it's so important that we really support in every way the transitions that are happening in countries like Ethiopia and Sudan, because of their potential to influence similar changes in the rest of the region. So it's not like every country, all the countries in Africa at some magical hour and magical year, we all be at the right point and behaving properly as it were. But it's also about incremental changes. So Eastern Africa, we have 2 countries. We really think they are going the right direction. I hope a year down the road we have a third one, as it were. And so that incremental progress, I think, is what we need, and I think what will keep Africans hopeful about the future.
I want to pick it up from there, Mburu. Now I come to the Open Society Foundations that has worked over the years to promote open society values, and some of these things that we talk about are, we face them mainly because of the challenges we face because of the trampling on these values that we believe in. And I see all of us here, beyond working for Open Society Foundations, I see the commitment and the belief in Africa. So what are we thinking about as Open Society Foundations to make sure that we contribute towards that future that we so desire?
So that's what we've all been meeting about, right? Sort of trying to see, okay, in your space that you have some control over the platform of OSF and everything it can bring to bear, social capital, money, connections, and so on, in a humble and sort of self-aware way of that privilege. What is it we can invest in? What is it individually and collectively? And I mean, for us at the African Regional Office, obviously we work at a continental level. We really believe, and we've said it, I mean, everyone is going to be able to quote me verbatim moving forward. We believe in African knowledge of ourselves and our situation. We believe in African agency about our ability to change in our situation. We believe in African solidarity, our ability to learn and support one another and act collectively when necessary. Our big anchor is sort of supporting the regional integration effort, supporting African institutions, not just norm making, but in terms of their ability to influence one another, and to try and help us and our teams think in that way as well, that this is just one platform. It's an amazing platform. There are so many things we can do with it. Let's not do it in a lazy, bureaucratic, tired, overly bureaucratic, technical, professional way. Let's do it in a way, as Africans who are like, hey man, for as long as I'm here, this is, I'm gonna direct this to where my beliefs are, my principles. Otherwise, what are you doing here? You know, go work in a bank. Yeah, not that we don't need banks. We need banks.
Yeah.
I'm a believer in banks.
Yeah. I would add to that. I mean, one of the things that is really at the core of everything that we do is the passion that we've got for the work that we do, right? So we do this work not because it's a job. Yes, it's a job because it gives an income, but at the end of it, you are passionate about it. I think South Africa has been shocked to the core by a decade of state capture. And in a way, I see that as an opportunity for us. We never thought that we would be in a position where everything has been captured to a point where it's in a state of collapse. But at the same time, it happened so early in our democracy that we now know what can go wrong. So we have a decade ahead of us where we need to fix stuff that should not have been broken in the first place. But also we are in a position to say never again will this happen, not in South Africa. So we need to be able to always remind ourselves, and when I say we, both as South Africans, but also mainly as civil society and the young generation, to be able to hold whoever is in power accountably in a transparent way, and not to take our eye off the ball, which we've had in the last decade. Somehow we took our eye off the ball and we ended up with all sorts of problematic issues that are now taking us backwards instead of forwards in terms of the economy, in terms of the environment, in terms of, you know, the state of our education system, the state of our health system, just general issues. We already had a lot on our plate when we started this democracy. Just to be able to get to a stage where this rainbow nation becomes a real rainbow nation. Halfway through that journey, we broke it deliberately by allowing it to just go completely, into different kinds of rabbit holes where things just were in a state of chaos. So at this point in time is to put our shoulders to the wheel and say, we have to rebuild. We have to reinvent in making sure that our state institutions are strong. We have to support areas where we've actually been able to keep things going, like a free press, for example, a human rights environment, that even if not all the rights are realized, but at least there is a sense that human rights are still at the top of our agenda. So as we go forward, that's what we need to be doing.
So we've made a deliberate choice as the Open Society that we're going to make investments and we're going to provide support and solidarity to the powerless, with the objective of supporting their efforts to push for the reconfiguration of power in the different societies. And this is not really a case of saying we want a government out of power, we want this guy not to be president. But there is need in any society, power has to be shared, it has to be mediated, so that those that are in charge are accountable. At least they know that they owe their being there to those that put them there, and that they are there for a purpose. They are controlling resources for a purpose. It is not so that the purpose is not for them to eat those resources, but so people in our countries are our primary partners, organizations, individuals, those that are agitating for a better society, a more equal society, a more open society, a just society, fair society. Those are the people that we deliberately seek out to help amplify their efforts, support their efforts. And you will see us do more of that. And you will see these kind of entities change. Artists sometimes, musicians. It won't be NGOs that people might always think we support NGOs. It would be anybody who's trying to make a difference in any setting, in any society, and fighting back at this strong, powerful interest that is oppressing our people and impoverishing our countries. So you will see us do a lot of that.
In Eastern Africa, and I think this is true, frankly, across Africa, transformation, I think, is also about having institutions that work and that are accountable ultimately to the people. Our parliament has to work. Our judiciary has to work and be effective. Our security services have to be effective and to be accountable. So having public institutions that work that are effective, but more importantly, are also accountable to citizens is part, I think, of the transformation that is required for the region and for Africa. I think another element of transformation that is really critical for all of us is getting to a place where everybody, all Africans, are recognized, appreciated for who they are, irrespective of the differences that we have. It's about having a society in which people are not judged on the basis of their ethnicity, their gender, their race, their color, their sexual orientation, their religion. That's the kind of society we have, a society which truly embraces everybody and which accepts difference, because difference really is part of the human identity. We'll always have differences. We'll be different in different ways, but we've got to live together as a society that embraces each other despite the differences that naturally come to us because of our identity as human beings.